Can you imagine flashbangs shattering the silence of your home at dawn? Your family being dragged outside at gunpoint, pajamas and all, while armed agents are tearing through your belongings. And when it's all over, they find nothing. The damage is done, and nobody's held accountable? In this video, we'll talk about how the ATF is turning law-abiding citizens into victims of their heavy-handed tactics. From vague warrants to reckless raids, we'll uncover the shocking stories and connect the dots to a disturbing pattern of government overreach. If you think this couldn't happen to you, think again. The agency sworn to protect is now causing destruction, trauma, and fear. And it's high time we ask the hard questions. It started before dawn, the time when families like Mark Manley's are still wrapped in the peace of sleep, or in his case, preparing for a long day of work and community service. Mark's wife was in the living room sipping her morning coffee, but that calm shattered in an instant. The ATF descended on their Maryland home with flashbangs, battering rams, and armed agents crawling through the grass. In seconds, their home was a war zone. Flashbang grenades exploded inside the house, sending debris flying and leaving permanent scars on their floors and walls. Mark's wife was thrown into a state of shock as the devices detonated near her, leaving her disoriented and concussed. Upstairs, Mark scrambled to get his children awake and alert. He knew what was happening. The agents were already breaching the doors, their weapons drawn and ready. When the family came downstairs, their hands raised in compliance, the sight was nothing short of devastating. Red dots from rifles marked the trembling forms of Mark's teenage daughters, one in a tank top, the other in pajamas. His 15-year-old son was still in bed when a flashbang was thrown into his room, leaving him cowering under the covers. Even as he complied, hands in the air, agents threatened to shoot him. The Manleys weren't criminals. Mark, a community educator and staunch Second Amendment advocate, had no illegal firearms in his home. He wasn't even a felon, though the ATF's warrant claimed otherwise. The raid was based on allegations of machine gun possession, but every weapon in his home was legal and properly registered. Still, that didn't stop agents from tearing through his belongings, violating his safe, and leaving his house in ruins. When they finally finished, they left with nothing but Mark's cell phone, offering no explanation or apology. The emotional toll was as profound as the physical destruction. Mark's children, who were raised with respect for firearms and safety, now associate guns with terror and helplessness. His wife, a school teacher who had never encountered violence like this, struggles to cope with the aftermath. And Mark himself, an educator, activist, husband, and father, was left grappling with his role as protector, forced to endure the humiliation of being powerless to shield his family. The damage wasn't limited to emotions. Their once stable home now bears the scars of the raid. Shattered doors, holes in the flooring, and debris scattered everywhere. The flashbangs alone left marks so severe that entire sections of their floor would need replacement. Yet, as Mark and his family began piecing their lives back together, the injustice lingered. The warrant that justified this assault was riddled with errors and ambiguities. It claimed Mark possessed machine guns and was engaging in illegal activity, a complete fabrication. Mark followed every firearm regulation in Maryland, a state known for its stringent gun laws. Yet this didn't stop the ATF from labeling him a threat and unleashing their full force on his family. The Manley story is one of unnecessary trauma inflicted by an agency meant to protect. But it's also not an isolated incident. Families like theirs have faced similar horrors at the hands of the ATF, leaving communities to wonder, who will be next? The answers lie in a troubling pattern of overreach. where the agency's actions seem more focused on intimidation than justice. And Mark Manley's case is just one chapter in a much larger story. Over the years, the ATF has developed a reputation for aggressive enforcement tactics justified by ambiguous interpretations of the law. One of the most glaring examples came in March 2024, when a pre-dawn raid in Little Rock, Arkansas, ended in the death of Brian Malinowski, a law-abiding citizen whose only crime was being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or so it seemed. Malinowski, a respected member of his community, was awakened in the early hours of March 19th by ATF agents storming his home. The operation was allegedly based on suspicions that Malinowski was illegally dealing firearms without a federal license. However, what began as an investigation into paperwork violations escalated into a deadly encounter. According to official reports, Malinowski fired a warning shot, apparently fearing he was being attacked by intruders. The agents returned fire, fatally wounding him. He died 2 days later, leaving his family and community reeling. The ATF quickly justified the raid, claiming Malinowski's actions posed a direct threat to their agents. But this explanation failed to satisfy public scrutiny. Questions arose about why such overwhelming force was used for what amounted to a regulatory issue. Malinowski had no criminal history, and the alleged offenses didn't justify the violent tactics employed. The lack of body camera footage further deepened suspicions, leaving many to wonder whether the ATF's version of events could be trusted. Despite the uproar, the ATF agents involved faced no consequences. A review by the Pulaski County prosecutor deemed the use of deadly force justified, citing Malinowski's warning shot as a provocation. This decision only fueled public outrage. It's just another example of the ATF escaping accountability for its actions. The incident became a rallying cry against this tyrannical agency that loves to overstep its boundaries and target law-abiding citizens. And again, Malinowski's case is just one of many. Over the years, the ATF has been involved in a series of raids and operations that have raised serious concerns about its methods. In 2022, the agency faced backlash for targeting firearm owners with pistol braces, reclassifying millions of previously legal firearms as short-barreled rifles under the National Firearms Act. This sudden change left countless gun owners scrambling to comply with new regulations, often at significant personal expense. Critics called it a blatant overreach, designed to entrap unsuspecting citizens in legal technicalities. The ambiguity of firearm laws has often been a tool for the ATF to justify its actions. Cases abound where individuals have been targeted not for actual crimes, but for falling afoul of complex and ever-changing regulations. In one instance, a Kansas veteran was prosecuted for selling legally purchased suppressors after the ATF retroactively classified them as illegal under state law. Jeremy Kettler, a disabled U.S. Army veteran from Kansas, purchased a firearm suppressor from Shane Cox, owner of an Army surplus store in Chanute, Kansas. Both men believed they were acting within the law, relying on the Kansas Second Amendment Protection Act of 2013, which asserted that firearms and accessories made, sold, and kept within Kansas borders were exempt from federal regulation. Kettler, seeking to protect his hearing during target practice, did not register the suppressor federally, trusting the state law's assurances. However, federal authorities, citing the NFA that mandates the registration of suppressors and imposes a $200 tax, charged both men with violating federal law. Cox was convicted of manufacturing and selling unregistered suppressors, while Kettler was convicted of possession. Their defense, based on adherence to state law, was dismissed in federal court, emphasizing the supremacy of federal regulations over conflicting state statutes. Kettler received a year of probation, and Cox was sentenced to 2 years. The U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear their appeal in 2019, leaving the convictions intact and highlighting the complex interplay between state initiatives like SAPA and overarching federal firearms laws. The fallout from these incidents has been devastating, not just for the individuals involved, but for public trust in the ATF. Families have been torn apart, homes destroyed, and lives lost, all under the banner of law enforcement. Yet accountability remains non-existent. Agents never face consequences for their actions, and the agency itself operates with minimal oversight, shielded by a labyrinth of bureaucratic protections. The pattern is clear. The ATF's aggressive tactics and ambiguous rules create a system where law-abiding citizens are often caught in the crossfire. The question isn't whether the agency has overstepped its bounds. It's how much longer this pattern can continue unchecked. And as these cases pile up, they expose deeper issues with the agency's role in interpreting and enforcing the law. The right to bear arms, guaranteed under the Second Amendment, has long been a cornerstone of American identity. Yet incidents like these raids leave many gun owners questioning whether their rights are protected or actively under siege. These cases of ATF's overreach reveal a disturbing trend. The warrants used to justify these raids are erroneous. In Mark's case, he never owned a single illegal firearm, had no criminal record, and followed every regulation in Maryland, a state with some of the strictest gun laws in the country. Yet the vague language of the warrant allowed federal agents to execute a violent raid, terrorizing his family in the process. The Constitution mandates that warrants be issued based on probable cause, and that warrants should also describe in particular the place to be searched and the items to be seized. In Mark's case, these standards were clearly not met. The warrant accused him of being a felon, a blatant falsehood, and claimed he possessed machine guns, despite no evidence to support such allegations. This misuse of authority didn't just violate Mark's rights, it set a dangerous precedent. If such vague and inaccurate information can justify a violent raid, many others could find themselves in similar situations. Accountability, or the lack thereof, compounds the issue. In Mark's case, no agents faced disciplinary action for their actions during the raid. The ATF's internal review process often operates behind closed doors, shielded from public scrutiny. This lack of transparency leaves victims like Mark and his family with little recourse and sends a chilling message. Even when errors are made, those responsible are never held accountable. The system protects its own, leaving citizens to bear the consequences. For many gun owners, the ATF's actions feel less like enforcement and more like targeted intimidation. The agency's habit of exploiting ambiguities in firearm laws has created an environment where law-abiding citizens become collateral damage in their efforts to crack down on firearms ownership. Whether it's reclassifying firearms under new regulations or using outdated information to justify raids, the pattern is clear. The rights of individuals are often secondary to the agency's enforcement goals. This erosion of constitutional protections doesn't just affect gun owners. It threatens the legal foundation of due process itself. The Fourth Amendment's protections against unreasonable searches and seizures are undermined when warrants based on faulty information can lead to such violent outcomes. If the ATF can raid Mark Manley's home without consequence, there's no stopping similar overreach in other areas of law enforcement. These legal and constitutional concerns aren't abstract. They have real, human consequences. Families are left traumatized, homes are destroyed, and lives are forever changed by the actions of an agency that appears to operate with impunity. The emotional and psychological toll of these raids often lingers long after the agents leave, creating a ripple effect that impacts entire communities. When the ATF stormed Mark Manley's home, they left behind more than broken doors and shattered floors. The emotional and psychological scars inflicted on his family run deeper than any physical damage. For the Manleys, what began as an ordinary morning turned into a nightmare they can never forget. Flashbangs exploded, rifles were pointed at children, and the family's sense of safety was stripped away in an instant. This wasn't just a raid, it was an assault on their humanity. The trauma is especially devastating for the Manley children. Mark's 15-year-old son was woken by a flashbang grenade thrown into his bedroom. Disoriented and terrified, he raised his hands in compliance, only to be threatened with being shot. His teenage sisters, one dressed in pajamas and the other in a tank top, were forced to walk past armed agents with red laser dots from rifles trained on their chests. These children weren't suspects, nor were they threats. Yet, they endured an experience that no amount of reassurance from their parents could erase. Psychologists often talk about the long-term effects of such trauma on young minds. Children who face this level of fear and helplessness often develop symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, including nightmares, hypervigilance, and emotional detachment. Mark now finds himself grappling with how to help his children process an experience that no one should have to endure. He said, quote, "I see it in them. Moments of lashing out, moments of withdrawal. They don't even fully understand what they're going through yet." His wife is also struggling. Before the raid, she had never been exposed to violence of this nature. Now she finds herself haunted by flashbacks, unable to reconcile the image of their peaceful home with the chaos that unfolded that morning. These human costs demand action. Families like the Manleys can't be left to pick up the pieces alone. If you'd like to help them, a GoFundMe campaign has been established to help cover legal fees, repair costs, and the resources needed to rebuild their lives. But financial support alone isn't enough. Sharing their story amplifies the call for justice and ensures that their suffering doesn't go unnoticed. So this might sound like a shameless plug, but it'd help not just us, but the Manleys, if you could share this video with other pro-Second A individuals and patriots. Legislative changes are urgently needed to establish clearer rules and prevent arbitrary enforcement. Laws should ensure that agencies like the ATF are held accountable for their actions, with stricter oversight to protect citizens' rights. Every error, every warrant based on misinformation should face public scrutiny. Solidarity within the Second Amendment community is more critical than ever. This isn't just about gun rights. It's about ensuring that government overreach doesn't erode fundamental freedoms. Standing united means advocating for victims, demanding transparency, and working toward reforms that prevent future tragedies. Together, we can turn these stories of pain into a catalyst for change. And that's it for this video. If there was value in it for you, please consider leaving a like, subscribing to our channel, and clicking on the bell icon so you don't miss out on more content like this. Thanks for watching.